Before before this early morning's group meditation, let's explore the mistake you cannot make with anxiety and concentration. We'll begin with a question I stumbled upon on Reddit. Anxious thoughts. The person wrote, and the person has a good heart. I have always had a lot of worries and I am generally anxious, and that's a burden. Let's continue. I have only done 2 meditation sessions. It's been really helpful in identifying my anxious thoughts, which tells us there is a lot there. Let's continue. Do I need to do anything specifically during my meditation about anxious thoughts? So, based upon the following context that follows, it seems very strongly, and this is very common, this person doesn't want to do anything else. Let's continue. They are quite strong and lead me to spiral into them. So I've seen this happens a lot of times. So as using a question with their teacher, but they're not really using the question to seek guidance. They're trying to seek permission. And so they're stacking the question in an effort to persuade the teacher. Once again, this is common. Number one of the dangers of working with a teacher is we can kind of treat them like a quasi or a surrogate parent. And many kids, almost all kids, try to manipulate their parents in one way or another. That seldom works out well spiritually. Let's continue. Or is it a simple case of acknowledgement and focus on the breath and let the anxiety sort itself out? So this is very, very close to being correct, but it's not. And I'm not trying to be pecky. I'm trying to prevent needless suffering. So the last thing we want to do is put the British have a saying, let's not put too sharp a point on this. And I never understood that until I began really studying the very first Dzogchen text, comprised by the first corporeal teacher of Dzogchen, Garab Dorje, also known as Prahe Vajra. And his whole thing, he inferred strongly to use generic terms. So instead of talking about emotional pain or emotional pleasure, just talk about emotion. Or instead of talking about physical pain or physical pleasure, just talk about physical phenomena or feelings or sensations. So this isn't about lying to ourselves about what we're feeling. This isn't about repressing about what we're feeling. It's about you avoiding the pitfall of over-enthusiastic labeling, which tends to excite our dualistic tendencies. Remember, the fundamental duality of Buddhism is not us and them, it's push and pull. And the Buddha has never taught us to become indifferent to that which is harmful, that which is beneficial. The quest is not to alleviate the presence of the fundamental duality, but the tyranny of that ultimate duality. So it's very helpful to have survival instincts. We just don't want to be controlled by them all the time, everywhere. So another telling point is word focus. And once again, it's not my job to beat people up, but it's my job to, if they're open to it, shave decades off of their suffering. Focus in the West is used as a synonym for concentration. What's wrong with that? We will explore that more deeply in a page or two. The worries are around or about uncertainty of future events that haven't happened, and being abandoned by my loved ones. And of course, that shouldn't be a bullet point there. Sorry, kids. There we go. And so these are understandable. There is a myth borrowed from Freudian psychology that fears are either rational or irrational. If they're irrational, they're to be dismissed. No. Our central nervous system doesn't care if something's rational or irrational. A fear is a fear. And we have to treat, it doesn't matter whether or not other people respect our fears or understand our fears. If we're going to help people, we have to, it doesn't matter why they're feeling what they're feeling. We have to help them with what they're going through. So let's get more specific now. Concentration makes anxiety worse. There's this myth that we're supposed to concentrate on our breath. There's this myth that we're concentrating on our breath, and when we notice anxiety, we label it anxiety, then we go back to our breath. But concentration is an act of indulging our yang tendencies, our proto-Sith Lord tendencies, that our tendencies to be rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. And it all boils down to this little tissue here called the amygdala. Now you might say, well, why not just surgically remove it? Because we need it to live. It is a primary survival mechanism. The question is not, the problem is not the presence of the amygdala, it's the tyranny of the amygdala. And concentration feeds that tyranny. If you want to optimize your central nervous system for the intensification of anxiety, then concentration is your pal. However, what you really want is to free yourself from that tyranny, we must practice the opposite of concentration. But how does that work? The opposite of concentration, from my view of things, is mindfulness. Mindfulness is cited as the first of 7 enlightenment factors. What that infers is that there can be no enlightenment without mindfulness. It's been my experience that as a neuroscience enthusiast, someone who is neurodivergent has to rely on neuroscience just to cope with my disorders and my the factors in my life that exacerbate those disorders. I've had to make a hobby of neuroscience, and here's what I've found. While concentration exacerbates the tyranny of our anxiety, mindfulness does the opposite. Every time we inhale, we access our sympathetic nervous system, which is wired not for active concentration, but instead to merely perceive. To perceive sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. To perceive emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, imaginings, and confabulations. So the cool thing is we do not have to force our conscious mind to do this, our prefrontal cortex to do this. We are already wired to do this during each inhalation, which is why it's perfectly appropriate during each inhalation to silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this. Welcome to the only label you need ever use. That takes a tremendous burden off of your prefrontal cortex, because people even more intelligent than me and you have wrestled with finding the perfect label, because there's so many shades of meaning and distinctions, both actual and subjective. Just using the ultimate generic label is optimal. So you're practicing mindfulness, you notice anxiety, what are you going to do about it? That's when we practice meditation. But how does meditation work? Well, if mindfulness relied on our sympathetic nervous system, meditation uses exhalation to access our parasympathetic nervous system, which is wired for both physical relaxation as well as mental release. We could say release, mental relief serves the carrier wave of physical relaxation. Or if you enjoy Walt Disney, physical relaxation is the sugar that makes the medicine go down. Therefore, during each exhalation, it's perfectly appropriate to silently and mentally recite the verb ease, which functions in this case as a synonym for relaxing. So the essence of meditation is as we sit in a sustainable, comfortable, impeccable posture to silently and mentally recite this and ease in harmony with our inhalation and exhalation, and stand back and watch our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems do the heavy lifting for us. I do look forward to chanting and meditating with you in a little bit more than a minute. But first, let's pause for housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. Welcome to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. If you love Star Wars and you wish to meditate as transformatively as young Luke Skywalker on Dagobah under the guidance of Yoda, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Now for a spot of good news. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist chanting, Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or their application, simply type your question in great detail in the chat window. Now, if you're watching on a laptop or a desktop, that'll be on the right-hand side of the screen. If you are using a smartphone, that should be down here. And now, together as a team, let's chant the Friday morning excerpt of the first Dzogchen text, titled The Vast Expanse of Vajrasattva. It was composed by Gaurab Dorje, translated from the Tibetan into English by Yeshe Donden, and adapted as well as amplified by this fool right here. Together, let's chant. All possible circumstances and all beings in them arise non-duly from the pristine continuum. So, there is no enemy to mindfulness and meditation. Mindfulness and meditation are already built into us. Therefore, there is no pleasure or pain that can divorce us from mindfulness and meditation. This is important. If we rely on faith and logic, we are setting ourselves up for disaster, because fatigue and extreme emotions undermine those things. Who can forget Egon's line to Vickman in the first Ghostbusters movie? I'm sorry, Peter, I'm terrified beyond the point of rational thought. That is a common thing. Perhaps that is why Vince Lombardi once is famous for saying that fatigue makes cowards of us all. By relying upon our autonomic nervous system, we always have mindfulness and meditation, we always have awareness and release available to us, despite the glories or grotesqueries of the present moment. Let's continue. In the purity of divine presence, there are no such distinctions as male or female. As we breathe in, we are wired to make 1,001 distinctions, but as we relax into our exhalation, we are wired to physically let go of those distinctions. They don't disappear. We just are taking a mental margarita. We're taking a vacation from grasping and controlling. Continue. In the domain of reality, there is no talk of getting somewhere by means of effort. I'm reminded of an American Tai Chi instructor whose favorite thing to say was, relax harder. That's like cops drawing their pistol at someone and screaming at them to relax. I'm sorry, but having people in polyester point firearms at me is not soothing. So we cannot strain our way into peace. That's too much like making love in the name of virginity. So one of the delicious ironies of Dzogchen is that it's so easy, it's befuddling. Those on the path of Yang, and sadly 90% of the folks out there are going to gravitate to the path of Yang according to Sturgeon's law. But the folks on the path of Yang who are so indoctrinated into being rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel, learn of the ease of the 7 factors of enlightenment, learn of the ease of Ati Yoga, and are befuddled. Let's continue. And yet some say that by using the powers of sound, one can generate the bliss of a magical illusion. So here is the double message. Is it possible to influence our experience with sound? Yes. But that experience is not permanent, it's not independent, and it, no matter how blissful it is as non-graspable, or is it as we relax into our exhalation, we experience it as being as non-graspable as the illusion of an infinite azure sky, as the illusion of a vast empty void. Let's continue. The true condition cannot be grasped conceptually, but appears in varied ways according to how one views it. So, we can't faith our way into liberation. We cannot logic our way into liberation. But we can inhale and exhale our way to liberation. We can notice and release our way to liberation. Good morning, James. No, that's an excellent question. James, the very insightful James, asked a good question. Can you manifest while meditating? And the answer is yes, but it works best if you do it passively. Whatever you dread or desire is going to tap you on the shoulder and say, hi, I'm what you dread and desire. And that's going to happen when you breathe in. Now, how do we deal with the real or imagined karma that could generate what we dread? How can we deal with the real or imagined obstacles that stand between us and our desires? Simple. Every time we exhale and we access the neurology necessary for physical relaxation and mental release, all that seems to generate that which we dread, all that which seems to obstruct that which we desire, is released, is dropped. So one of the most delicious ironies of Dzogchen, delicious Dzogchen. I love, what's it called? You have one letter for 2 words. Anyway, I love that. So anyway, effortless manifesting is possible. Whatever comes up, we acknowledge it generically with the demonstrative pronoun this. As we exhale, we physically relax, setting space to mentally release. As we do so, more and more, we find ourselves flowing from love's centered spontaneity, which acts like a mighty river upon which floats our choices and utterances and deeds, centered, spontaneous, and loving. And that is how life becomes juicy and succulent and abundant in the most wonderful way. Let's continue. To strive for bliss, desiring it to manifest, only generates obscuration and confusion. So, many people have been taught by many craptacular teachers that they need bliss to become a Buddha. And if they're not experiencing bliss, then they suck and they're a failure. And they suck, but not in the fun, tingly way. And the great irony is that bliss takes care of itself. Notice as you breathe in, relax as best as you can as you breathe out, and you can't help but feel bliss. It's just a question of whether it's subtle or coarse, whether we're aware of it or not, but it's there. My left knee is there whether I'm aware of it or not. It's not our job to manipulate our awareness. Persist with noticing and releasing in harmony with our inhalation and exhalation. Everything will take care of itself. Let's continue with the chanting. Meditating on the appearance of a deity is like meditating on the reflections of the moon in water. Although such meditators strive to be undefiled and unattached, their practices are like child's play. So, in Tantra, there are three categories of practices: Mahayoga, Anu Yoga, and Ati Yoga. Mahayoga is about visualizations and mantras and rituals. Anu Yoga is about channels, winds, and drops. Ati Yoga is just about awareness and acquiescence. In contemporary Dzogchen, more than 90% of the teachers insist that you need all three. That Maha Yoga is a prerequisite to Anu Yoga, which is a prerequisite to Ati Yoga, which makes perfect sense unless you read the words of the founder of Dzogchen, who is famous for saying, "Na'ah." Okay, maybe not exactly Na'ah, but he taught against such folly. He taught against mantras. He taught against visualizations. He taught against rituals. He taught against aspirational prayers and dedications of merit. Basically said, shut up and sit. Shut up, sit down, notice, release. That's the quick path. Buddha was similar. Buddha said, hey man, you don't need a ritual. To which everyone else said, shut up and sit down. Buddha, we know better than you. So one of the things that gets me in great trouble amongst other people who fancy themselves practitioners of Tibetan Buddhism is that I have a handful of teachers who have affected me deeply, and when a popular teaching is in conflict with one of those teachers, I choose to follow the teachers. And there is no teacher more fundamental to Dzogchen than Garab Dorje. Now, Garab Dorje says, hey, you don't need Maha Yoga and you don't need Anu Yoga. You only need to sit, watch, and release. Then he's the bloke what I pay attention to. Let's check for questions. There you go. And by the way, James, let's talk about greed for a second. We evolved to make sure that we have enough water, food, and shelter to survive. It is wired into us. We are wired to hate scarcity and love plenty. The presence of those impulses that is not a spiritual failing. Ignoring those impulses undermines our mindfulness. So it is wise to notice when our central nervous system hates scarcity and pain and scorn and anonymity and craves plenty and pleasure and praise and fame. We are wired for those things. Those things are integral to our probability of passing on our genetic material, and that is how natural selection works. Because only the people who hated those things and craved those four things I just mentioned lived long enough to pass on their material, we are the inheritors of those impulses. That doesn't make us bad. What makes us good or bad or wise or foolish is what we do with those impulses. And here's the irony. Repressing them is just as dangerous as indulging them. We traverse the middle ground of noticing them and releasing them. And there are a bunch of poop heads who prance about the countryside insisting that if we're truly spiritual, we will mock and denigrate our impulses, ideas, and emotions. That is folly. Better, our job is simple. Watch the play of mind as we breathe in, relax into the non-graspable nature of mind as we breathe out. If that is our action, then we are victorious. Regardless of what our mind's doing, whether our mind's doing something pleasurable or painful, glorious or grotesque. You know, I'm a big nerd, so I have a very special place in my heart for Chuck Lorre and The Big Bang Theory and young Sheldon. And I think it was in the first season of The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon says that he was trying to create a death ray as a child to kill the neighbor children who he found annoying. We're going to have dark, dangerous impulses. They don't make us good or bad. What makes us good or bad is what we do with them. Do we indulge them? Do we repress them? Or do we use them as that which fuels our spiritual journey upon the path of noticing and releasing? And now we're going to tap magic button 9. Whoopsie, so much for magic button 9, eh kids? Let's hit 9 again. Okay, let's go to the, come on machine, don't be that way. Let's click easy dzogchen. Let's click OK. Excuse me. Let us perform the concise recitations of bodhicitta and refuge to exercise the neural pathways responsible for empathy and enthusiasm. By the way, this extensive chant is wonderful when you want to take a nap or go to bed at night. This concise chant is wonderful when you want to wake up after a nap or wake up after a long night's sleep. Or in my case, if you have ADHD like me and you use exercise to access dopamine, I like to recite this while performing one of many, many, many variations of geriatric step-back squat thrusts. Variations with or without dumbbells, or with or without a chinning bar. Together. May I liberate all beings by relying on the 3 jewels. May I liberate all beings by relying on the 3 jewels. May I liberate all beings by relying on the 3 jewels. We've already explored mindfulness meditation, whether you describe it as Zen, Chan, Dhyana, Mahamudra, Mahasandhi, Hatha Yoga, Dzogchen, or Trekchö. We already described it in terms of perceiving and releasing in harmony with our inhalation and exhalation. So now as we sit in silent meditation, let us silently and mentally recite this and ease. The nudity of Samantabhadra reminds us to be vulnerable as we inhale. The translucence of Samantabhadra reminds us that as we relax into the nature of mind, that which we perceive during our inhalation can now feel as non-graspable as a vast empty void. The beauty of Samantabhadra reminds us that mindfulness and meditation feed the highest love, which is spontaneous and uncontrived. Welcome to this morning's live stream. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or how to apply them, simply type your question in the chat window, whether it's to the right of your screen or whether it is below the image on your screen. I check for questions about once every 7 to 9 minutes. In the interim, as you breathe in, we are wired to perceive. As you exhale, you are wired to both physically relax and mentally release. Therefore, as you inhale, silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this. And as you exhale, silently and mentally recite the verb is. Welcome to this morning's live stream. If at any point you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or how to apply them, simply type your question in the chat window. If you're watching on a laptop, it should be on the right-hand side of the screen. If you're watching on your smartphone, it should be at the bottom of the screen, assuming you're holding your phone vertically. As you breathe in, silently and mentally recite this. As you exhale, silently and mentally recite the verb ease. In doing so, you'll find that with each inhalation you notice, and with each exhalation you release. If not a lot, then at least a little bit. If you have any questions about Buddhist meditation, philosophy, or chanting, simply type your question in the chat window. Let us seal this morning's meditation with a bit of the old chanting. May all beings practice self-kind communication, conduct, and calmness flow spontaneous and uncontrived. May everyone be free from misery, may everyone be happy. May no one be separated from the happiness. May everyone have balance from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging freed. If you feel that I have earned it, you could type something in the chat window. You could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could share it with a friend. You could even help support this channel on Patreon. In approximately 2.5 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's mid-morning group meditation. Until then, may you and yours be happy and healthy. And if you are as geeky as me, this is the way.